The following happened when I was on a school French history trip to France and Belgium back in 2014, which incidentally was the 100th anniversary of the start of World War I. However, the paranormal events which occurred in this short trip had nothing to do with the many mass grave sites and historical locations we visited. In fact, they all occurred in the first, basic and cheap hotel we stayed in for the first 2 nights. The hotel, which I have since forgotten the name of, was bordering on a hostel. It was 6 of us to a room and 3 bunk beds, and I was sharing one with my closest friends. I also knew the other boys fairly well. I remember that on the first day we had been awake for well over 24 hours, so upon arriving at the hotel we didn't pay much attention to how it looked. However, we found it surprisingly hard to get to sleep immediately. The first strange occurrence happened while everyone was casually chatting as we lay in bed, probably at around 11 at night. Each bottom bunk had a light underneath it, and they were all controlled from one central wall switch over by the door. I should mention that we had all these lights off as we were meant to be asleep. However, in the middle of our conversation, one of the lights suddenly turned on. It stopped our conversation dead, and we were all slightly confused. This happened several more times with lights going on and off under the bunks while the wall switch didn't move. Everyone was getting visibly spooked at this point. However, one of the boys had found a second switch beside his bed, and we soon realized that every bunk had these to control the 3 lights. With everyone relaxed again, our 14-year-old imaginations calmed down significantly, and everyone began to nod off one by one. Later in the night, at what I estimate was about 1 in the morning, I was still half awake. I have always been a very light sleeper. I was listening to the deep breathing of everyone in the room when I heard an audible click. I turned around and saw the light to the walk-in shower was on. I assumed that someone had walked in to play a prank, but after quickly scanning my eyes about the room, I could see that everyone was in bed. I was confused, but not frightened yet. Shortly after the shower turned on seemingly by itself, I again turned over to face the walk-in shower. Sure enough, through the crack in the door I could see the shower water running. I turned away quickly and lay there for hours, unnerved before falling asleep. The next morning was busy, visiting several historical sites, and it wasn't until lunchtime in a cafe that a few of us brought up the night before. Several others testified to being awake when the light and shower turned on. We were all slightly unnerved, but it wasn't until the next night that things really kicked off. On the second night, everyone fell asleep very quickly, but as per usual, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake slightly nervous, and the main light of the room went on and off at intervals of around 10 minutes for around an hour. Then, at around 2 in the morning, I heard a huge crash and looked around to see that the shower door had swung open, completely hitting the wall. The light was on and shower running. I was terrified. I turned to face the wall and didn't open my eyes till the next morning. The next day, we moved to a different hotel, and the subject of the hotel being haunted was only brought up once more during the trip. Although this is one of the smaller experiences I've had regarding the paranormal, it sticks with me due to how unexpected it was. We found out that the original owner of the hotel had died from cancer, but I saw no evidence or reason that whatever caused the disturbance was her ghost or spirit. It is an experience that will always stick with me as being strange and spooky. When my husband and I first got married, we lived on a 3rd-floor apartment in the back of the complex. Outside our balcony, there was a stream that ran through and connected further down to a river, the Jordan River, which runs through parts of Salt Lake County. I would often sit on the balcony to watch the ducks and just enjoy the peace and quiet. As long as I can remember, I've had experiences with the paranormal, which is another subject, but nothing quite like this. And it quite frankly terrified me, but also completely blew my mind, and was also kind of cool at the same time. So around a month after we moved in, there was a woman nearby that went missing. Video from her apartment complex showed her running out of her apartment in a pouring rainstorm in what appeared to be a panic, and then she never came home. It was all over the news. It sounds weird, but I felt a connection to her even though she was a total stranger. We were around the same age, living a few miles apart. I felt very drawn to the case. Turns out a friend of mine knew her, and while I was at another one of our mutual friends' houses, he stopped by with flyers and asked us to come help with the search for her. I had to go to work, so I couldn't help, but I took the flyer and said I would definitely keep an eye out since her apartment where she went missing was just a mile or so from mine. I remember sitting on my balcony one night thinking about the missing woman, and the thought came to my mind, she's in the water. By in the water, the Jordan River is what came to mind. I shrugged it off because they were already searching the surrounding area of her apartment, so I figured, well, the river is part of that, and if she's in the water, they'll find her. Well, over a month went by and they still hadn't found her. So again, on another night, I was sitting on my balcony, looking down at the water, and the thought of this missing woman came up again, and I had this overwhelming feeling that she was in the water. Not the water behind my apartment, but where the water behind my apartment connected to the river. I didn't know what to think about the feeling because they'd already searched there, I thought anyway, and she hadn't been found. Later that night I was in bed, just laying there thinking about the feeling I'd had on the balcony. My husband was asleep and the apartment was quiet, just the light of the moon barely lighting the room. I was looking toward the door of the bedroom, simply because that was what was in front of me and in my line of sight. And then, in what I can only describe as an instant, this mass came hurling toward me and grabbed me. It didn't move me, but I felt my body how it feels when someone takes both hands and grabs you by the collars, like a wake-up grab. It scared me incredibly bad, so obviously I screamed. I darted out of bed. My husband was also now awake, and I turned on the light. There was now nothing there. I went back to bed, heart racing and trying to process what had just happened, and then it was like my brain was flooded with the word water over and over. 2 days later, they found the missing woman's body in the river, same river that the water behind my apartment connected to. She'd been there for quite some time. When I found out they found her and where it was, I got chills. I think whatever grabbed me that night was her, trying to tell me I was right. She was in the water and she desperately wanted to be found. That was in 2014, and I've often wondered why I felt a connection to her, a total stranger. Was it because there was some kind of energy that flowed through the water, and because I spent a lot of time on my balcony I picked up on it? Or was it some other connection? I may never know. I've always been into the paranormal world. Ever since I was a little kid, one of my favorite things to do was watching horror movies or paranormal TV shows. I used to get scared very, very easily, but that didn't matter to me. I guess I just liked the feeling of the adrenaline in my body until I got legit goosebumps. Luckily, or not, 2 years ago, I went through a lot of personal stuff and I stopped being frightened of everything involving paranormal stuff and sorts of that matter. And since I've always loved that kind of thing and I wasn't scared anymore, I started watching, hearing, and reading paranormal stuff at all times, like literally all day, every day. Before I stopped being frightened, I had already experienced some paranormal stuff through the years, but maybe I was just too scared to admit or openly talk about it. Maybe I'll start writing about them as well, but I wanted to start with this particular experience. Since I had been too involved in paranormal stuff for the last 2 years, I guess I attracted all sorts of energy, but mostly bad energy, and worse things, experiences, started happening to me. I know that the more you're involved, the more vulnerable you get. This happened 2 months ago. I was in San Diego with 3 of my closest friends because we were attending a concert, so we booked a hotel room for that matter. The night before the show, we were pretty tired and we wanted to sleep in early, so we could rest as much as we could for the show. So I went to sleep in the same bed as my friend, and in the other bed, a nightstand separated them, were my 2 other friends. In the middle of the night, I woke up suddenly, and in the corner of the room, I saw this big black figure that was staring at me, directly in the eye, and I sensed this super heavy, dark, bad energy around the room. I knew that there was something wrong. At this point, the energy was so bad that I knew I was in front of a demon himself. My best friend woke up and she was really confused because I grabbed her arm and squeezed so hard she started hurting. I don't recall this act, and she told me to calm down and stop accusing her of things she didn't do. She told me I was telling her to stop staring at me and scaring me, to just let me sleep. I don't recall telling her any of that. The only thing I remember was seeing the demon in the room instead, and it was staring right into my soul. After all the confusion and shouting, we calmed down and got back to bed. At this point, none of our other two friends had woken up. They were sleeping deeply. I was very, very scared. I think I've never been more scared in my life, but I really didn't want to scare her by telling her I had just seen a demon, so I let her go back to sleep. After a few minutes, I started telling myself to not let him get to me and that I wasn't scared anymore, so he couldn't feed off my fear and he would go away. I know for a fact that if you build up a wall in your mind and don't let it get to you, it really won't and it will go away. So I did that with all the energy I had left. But as I was telling all of that to myself, I sensed a second wave of super heavy, dark, bad energy, if you can call it that way, and the energy was going towards one of my two other friends who were sleeping, the one who was just across the nightstand, and I knew this demon had something to do with her. I don't even know how, I just knew, and their connection was so strong that just looking at her made me really uncomfortable and scared. A few minutes went by and I repeated to myself the things I said before, and tried to build a bigger wall in my head, and I did, and eventually it went away and I went back to sleep. The morning after, we were getting ready to go to the concert and I started talking to my best friend about the night before, and I told her and my two other friends that I had seen a demon, and before I got into details about what I had experienced, the friend that had the connection with the demon approached me and looked me right in the eye and told me that what I had experienced was because of her, that she had a demon with her and sometimes it manifested, and that she was so sorry about it, and that I shouldn't be afraid of it, that she wasn't afraid anymore since she had dealt with it for years. The craziest thing about this experience is that I didn't tell her or anybody at that point that I knew they had a connection. I still can't explain how I knew or sensed the connection between them, the demon and my friend, but the thing I knew is that it was very strong. Later she told us that since she was 12 years old, she played with a Ouija board by herself, and she thinks the demon follows her since then. It happened 2 days ago. It was early in the morning when I got the phone call that a friend had passed away. It's not a peaceful passing, because she was fatally wounded in the middle of a robbery. I spent quite a lot of time crying before attending the wake on the same day. I spent a good 1 to 2 hours after the ceremony ended bonding with the rest of her family, revisiting old memories of childhood that we spent together. Then the funeral took place today, in which I was also present, along with my parents and little brother. We got home separately because I needed to buy some stuff along the way for a school project. But when I got home, my parents asked me where I'd been this whole day. I was so confused because we went to the funeral and they were beside me the entire time. We only parted ways when I had to buy some stuff, but even that I've told them. Their reply was even more confusing, and I'm paraphrasing here. "Who is Joan? What funeral? We've been at home all day, but you left early this morning." I immediately pull up my phone with the intention of showing them our pictures together, but as expected, there's nothing. Did I really attend a funeral of a friend that never existed, or am I just having a very vivid delusion? Update. It's been almost 3 weeks since I've experienced this. I went for an additional checkup since I am scheduled for one every 6 months due to my physical conditions. The test results showed neither new red flags nor abnormal spikes from the pre-existing red flags. With this, I also made an appointment with a psychiatrist to determine whether I am experiencing a delusional disorder. So far, this is shown to be inconclusive. After checking and reviewing some proofs that I have, like the stuff that I supposedly bought and the missing time I had, I'm leaning more to that this is not a glitch, but a memory gap being filled by my own brain's mechanisms, or even in overlapping memories of dreams I've had while asleep and one of the reality. That addressed, I wanted to answer some repeated questions in the comments. I can't find anything on the obituaries with the name I remember. No news whatsoever of said break-in. I also asked around neighbors and friends for the existence of said person, still a negative. I posted here because I thought that this is the right subreddit and I wanted to get the thought out while also having people from their objective point of view take a look on this matter, a differing look. I don't use Reddit actively, only reading and scrolling, filling my time. Thus this empty account, but I do follow a lot of other subreddits and scrolling through the timeline. This is the first time I've ever posted anything apart from that one question that got deleted. I'm still kind of at a loss of what I experienced. Has anyone ever been in this situation before? "12 years ago, I bought my girlfriend an antique ring. It has a unique design, wraps around the finger 3 times. We've never married, so she considers the thing as a kind of de facto wedding ring. It's dear to her. It has disappeared once before when someone we didn't know well stole it from our house. I had an idea of who it was and was able to get it back. This last weekend I was playing a show out of town which had us staying in a bandmate's RV with their family. When we were driving home from there on Saturday, my girlfriend realized she didn't have her ring. She checked her bag thoroughly and then said she had a faint memory of taking it off and setting it next to the sink in the RV. Yesterday, we went over and scoured the RV for it, every nook and cranny, nothing. She went through every pocket in her travel bag again, twice, and nothing. This morning, right before she left for work, I hear her say, 'What is this?' She had stepped on something right in the middle of our bedroom doorway. She picked it up and handed it to me. It was a small plastic black piece of my GoPro. It covers the USB charging port. It had disappeared back in February while at a winter cabin in the mountains, or possibly even while skiing as I was taking videos, and had never been found. I'd actually replaced it through GoPro, but there it was, right in the middle of the floor 9 months later. She left for work and I started thinking that the return of the GoPro piece was a signal that there had been an edit in my inventory, as it were. I suddenly strongly suspected that this meant the ring was back. I went and checked the bag. Right in one of the main pockets, as plain as day, there was the ring. This kind of stuff used to happen to me when I was a teenager, and it seems like it's back. I'm also the guy who posted about the watch that suddenly materialized a few days ago. Needless to say, my reality is feeling pretty fluid right now. I was working as a project manager for an accounting software company. My team had been working with a very difficult client for months. Every time we submitted our work, the client decided that they wanted more, they wanted less, they wanted this changed or that changed. We would make suggestions that they ignored, we would submit again, and they would then decide they liked our suggestions. It was dragging on far too long and my team was getting fatigued. At the same time, my mother's health was failing. She was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and had about 5 months to live, as it turned out. So I stopped at her house on my way home every day to spend some time with her and check on her. She was a feisty old broad, so she took care of herself until she had to start hospice care 3 days before she passed. So one day at work, my team submitted our latest coding and sent it off to our client. It was a Friday, so I told my team that if this latest work was finally accepted, we would all be leaving work as soon as we heard the good news, and we all sat back and waited. Miracle of miracles, we got that call before noon and our job was finally done. For the record, our software had gone full circle and was 99% the same as our first submission, but whatever, I don't hold a grudge. So we left early that day, just before lunch, which was pretty much unprecedented. And as I drove to my mom's, after some time I found the ultimate best route from work to mom and never varied my route. I spent several hours with my mom that day and we had a glorious time. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I really felt like our time together that day was significant and blessed. As it turns out, I ended up leaving her house at about the same time I usually left work. To get home, I virtually had to pass my office, so I used the same route as when driving from work to mom's, only in reverse. I was slowing down for a stop sign about 10 minutes into the trip when I noticed a car stopping at the opposing stop sign. It was exactly like my car. At the time, I drove a 2003 Pontiac Aztek. Yep, that sad little car that was cool for a minute before it was blown up in Breaking Bad. And my car was absolutely filthy as I just didn't have the time to deal with it. The car opposing me, same model, same year, same filth. I even noticed the same dent on the driver's side rear panel. Of course, I was curious, so as we passed each other, I checked out the driver. She looked exhausted and sad. She stared straight ahead, so she never saw me. And she was me. Same hair, same face, same hands on the same places on the steering wheel. I was driving, past myself. I was going home, but I was also driving to my mom's at the exact time I did virtually every other day. That poor version of me apparently was still being yanked around by a difficult client and was feeling the stress and strain of another hard day, while this version of me was finally done and had a great day with my mom. I saw the car in my rearview mirror as I realized I had instinctively started to brake, but almost immediately the other car turned a bend and was gone. I was shaken, so I pulled over to get my wits back. I kept telling myself I couldn't have seen what I saw. This just had to be some crazy coincidence, but I knew better. When I got home, I called my mom. I acted cool, like I just wanted to tell her I got home safe. She wasn't at all surprised by my call, so I knew I wasn't sitting there talking to her, but there was no question in my mind that I had just witnessed something extraordinary. "15 years ago, I was working part-time at a clothing store in a strip mall in Ohio. I wanted a second job, so I applied at other stores on the block. While sitting down at a restaurant filling out their job application, all of the staff gathered about 10 feet from me and stared. I heard them whispering to each other, "It's Rebecca. Wow, she's back." My name is Rebecca, but this was the first time I had been in this restaurant. I was confused, and then it was awkward walking up to them to give them the application. Yes, they were still all there watching me. The woman I handed my application to looked at it and then looked a bit confused. "Huh, we thought you were the Rebecca who used to work here, but you have a different last name." That was kind of a crazy coincidence, but it was just that, a coincidence, so I forgot about it. At the clothing store I worked at, I was reminded of the coincidence when people from the restaurant who used to work there would come in and think I was the Rebecca they knew. It happened multiple times, and people would start conversations with me legitimately thinking I was her. And someone told the person she was talking to on the phone, "You'll never guess who works here. Rebecca from the restaurant." And this also happened when I would pick up lunch for my bosses from the restaurant. Someone there told me that Rebecca moved to Florida a while ago. One day, I was working at the front end of the store putting security tags in clothes, and I saw a woman approach the doors. I can't even explain what I felt when she came in, but when I think about it, I get chills. I knew who she was the moment I saw her. At the same time, we both said, "Rebecca?" She was in town visiting, and her former colleagues told her about me. Then we both agreed that we looked nothing alike, and we had no clue what everyone was talking about. She left, and the whole exchange was over in a minute. My manager was in the back, and she was so mad that I didn't come and get her so she could be a better judge of our similarities. I wish I had done it. I know the story seems anticlimactic, but the thing is, 15 years later, I still remember what I felt when I saw her, and how cosmic and totally eerie it was, without even knowing it was actually her. When I think about it, I get chills that last for an hour afterwards, and chills feels like a complete understatement. It all feels supernatural. I felt a powerful and bizarre connection. For 17 years, I had a black and white tuxedo cat named Rascal. One of Rascal's favorite hiding and chill-out spots was in cabinets. He had learned how to open up cabinets early in his life, but you could always tell when he was going into one because of the noise the cabinet door would make when it closed. It would always take a few times of him opening the cabinet a little bit before he'd go in, so the door would end up closing repeatedly and making the sound, a little bit of a bouncing sound. We suspected that he may have also been playing with the door to make the sound on purpose, as he also used to like to play with the springy doorstop things. Sometimes he'd hide out in the kitchen cabinets, sometimes the bedroom cabinets. Probably his favorite spot was under the sink in the cabinet of the vanity in the guest bathroom. He chilled out here most often because this was the bathroom that got the most traffic, and the sink was how he preferred to get his water. What he would do was wait for someone to sit down in the toilet, then he'd push the cabinet door open as he'd meow, jump up on the sink, and then he'd give a friendly purr as his way of asking for water. If you didn't immediately turn the water on for him, he'd stare at you, give you another purr, and then maybe bat at the faucet with his paw or mark the faucet with his cheeks. He would be very insistent and demanding until you fulfilled his water request. No, it didn't matter that you had other business to attend to in the bathroom. Once the water was turned on to a steady trickle, he'd put his entire head under the water, then drink it up, whatever fell into the sink from his head. We tried one of those self-watering dishes, both the bottle ones and the cat water slide types, and he just played with the water and made a mess. He wouldn't drink from a bowl unless he was desperate. We assumed this was because drinking from a bowl was something that dogs do, and it was beneath his status as a cat. So this was the way it was until May of 2015, when Rascal passed away at the age of 17. I tell you that story so that you have the background for the next part of the story. First off, you should know that I'm not a religious person or what you would typically define as spiritual. That is, I've never had much direct experience with anything I could define as being spiritual, seeing ghosts or paranormal that couldn't be explained away by logic or coincidence. I work in IT and tend to be very logical, analytical, and scientific in my thinking. To be brutally honest, I have Asperger's, a form of autism spectrum disorder. I have a very keen sense of hearing and tend to notice small details that often get overlooked by others. One night, about a month after Rascal had passed away, my wife and I were watching something on TV, and I heard the cabinet door in the kitchen trying to be open like the cat used to do. I thought it might be the dog brushing past the cabinet, but then as I looked towards the kitchen, I see our dog laying down on the side of the couch fast asleep. It was then that I also heard that distinct meow, exactly like Rascal used to make. My eyes got really wide, and I looked at my wife to see her eyes just as big and a puzzled expression on her face as she asked me, "You heard that too, didn't you?" Being the skeptic that I am, I asked her, "Maybe, but what did you hear?" She responds, "I swear I heard Rascal meow and try to open the cabinet door in the kitchen." I felt relieved that she corroborated what I heard, but I felt really weird because it was definitely something I could not logically explain. I got up to check the cabinets, mainly out of a last-ditch effort to reconcile what we heard with a logical explanation. My thought was, maybe a neighbor's cat got into here while we had the front door cracked open when we let the dog out. As expected, there was no cat in any of the cabinets. This actually happened again about 2 weeks later, and both my wife and I heard it this time too. She believes it was our cat's spirit and took comfort in knowing he was still around, though I sort of just accepted the anomaly as something weird happened and I can't explain it. The kicker to the story happened about a year later when we had a guest over. She had to use the guest bathroom, and when she came out, she asked, "You guys didn't tell me you had a cat?" My wife and I looked at each other with very big eyes, and then I asked our guest, "What do you mean?" She then said that while she was sitting there using the toilet, she was reading an article on her phone and she heard a cat meow, but she made the very distinct sound that our cat made. She said, "It sounded like a meow, but phrased like a question." Then I heard the vanity cabinet door being opened, and when I looked up, I saw the door closed. I opened the cabinet, but there was no cat there. I thought that was pretty odd, especially since you never told me that you had a cat. I said to her, "We never mentioned we had a cat because he passed away last year. The host's favorite hideout was under the sink in the bathroom in the vanity cabinet." Her eyes got really big and could only muster out saying, "Whoa." We then explained how he passed, showed her pictures of Rascal, and told her some other stories about him. It's good to know that he's still around. My friend and I were driving around the back roads of Ballard County in western Kentucky. It was about 2 a.m. I was driving and turned onto a gravel farm road. As I did, I caught sight of something white and vaguely human crawling in the ditch. As we passed, I hit the brakes, thinking it was a person who needed help. "Are you crazy? Don't stop!" Blake screamed. My friend. I looked in the mirror and saw that it was standing up. Even though it was still in the ditch, it was as tall as the stop sign next to it. It took a step towards us and I hit the gas. As we drove away, I saw in the mirror that it dropped to all fours and was crawling after us. I didn't start pulling away from it till I got up to about 40 miles per hour. Though we were so close to it, I never got a good look at it. It was fuzzy, like it was constantly out of focus. I'm not sure why, but something about it makes me think of it as male, maybe the height. When it crawled, it moved like it had lizard hands and feet flat on the ground, elbows and knees up and out, body wiggling side to side. This happened when I was around 22. I'm 40 now and have never seen that thing again. I've taken many a midnight cruise along those narrow roads, but I've never had the nerve to go near that particular farm road again. Call me a chicken. I'll cluck happily. One time when I was visiting Lake Tahoe in Northern California, me and my buddies decided to make a night journey to Emerald Bay. There wasn't a normal speed limit sign like I'm used to. However, there was a sign that issued a maximum speed for you not to exceed. And from now having experience on this road, I would say you shouldn't even approach that speed because it just isn't safe. Well, long story short, I was driving, and it was pitch black outside, and I was trying as closely as I could to maintain the maximum speed, as the roads were very curvy and it was fun. As I'm driving around a rather sharp curve in the road, we end up behind a street sweeper truck which seemed to come out of nowhere and seemed oddly out of place. It was nearly 2 a.m., and the truck was operating as if it was broad daylight. Well, as I got closer to the street sweeper, I had to reduce my speed by a lot. There was a sign on the back of the truck that said something along the lines of, "Do not follow work truck." Well, as I'm driving behind this truck and about to pass it, the letters on the sign start to shift and rearrange themselves, and I kid you not, the new message said, "Drive slowly," and I couldn't believe my eyes that I had just seen this sign change. Well, I passed the truck and I'm going about 15 miles per hour because, well, the sign said drive slowly and I was freaked out. The very next turn we come to, I had to slam on my brakes and veer sharply just to make the turn. And had the street sweeper not have been there and had the sign not have changed, I would have been maintaining my speed like a madman and we would have surely driven off the road. After our adventure, we returned to the hotel, and just a reminder, this whole drive was taken in the dead of night. We make the same exact trip in the morning and it's obviously broad daylight. And needless to say, we were all shocked as to how different the landscape around the road we were driving on looked than we expected because, well, we had driven in the dead of night and now we could see. When we got to the part of the road where I had to slam on the brakes and veer just to make the turn the night before, the road made a U-shaped turn and it was high up on a mountain with no guardrail, and we were looking right over the cliff. And if we hadn't slowed down, we surely would have plummeted to our deaths. Thank you to whoever for saving our lives. I'm getting chills just thinking about this event. I want to preface this by saying that I've had a lot of stuff happen to me on my grandparents' land. It's 75 acres of horror if you're not used to it. I grew up there, so a lot of this didn't faze me too much. So if my reactions are odd, it's because this is my life and I'm kind of desensitized. No, this is not the only thing to chase after me in my car, but this one was different. I was 17 years old, driving from my dad's house on the before-mentioned land. Pretty late, I think it was around 11 or so. I had dropped someone off at my dad's house and was driving back into town to get back to my mom's place. As I was driving down our long driveway, I kept seeing things move in the field. I didn't pay any attention, probably a rabbit or something. Things moving in the grass is normal. I get out to the road and I see something or someone in the ditch just laying there. Me being a girl in a raggedy old car at a place with terrible signal in the middle of the night with no weapon on me, I floor it. I don't care. I figured I could call my dad later to take care of the possible drunk in the ditch. I'm driving down the road, memory of the ditch person creeping me out. I get this awful feeling of being watched. I'm traveling down this road at nearly 60 miles per hour with no signal whatsoever. Okay, maybe I'm just overreacting. Whatever. I still speed up because I want to get signal to call my boyfriend because it would make me feel safer. Then I see something running alongside my car. Well, I say running. It was more skittering. Lanky limbs, on all fours, running and keeping up with me, going 60+ miles per hour down a country logging highway. I think my brain kind of had an aneurysm at this point, because I'm just repeating to myself, What? I'm getting closer to civilization though, so I floor it, getting up to 80 and leaving it behind. I call my boyfriend, freaking out about what I saw. I pulled over at a little church with a light out front, trying to logic it out of my mind when I see the thing again. It's on the road, skittering towards my parked car. Before I have time to pull out of the lot, it's on me, hitting my car hard enough to dent the rear bumper. I scream, squealing out of the lot and driving like a maniac towards town. I get into town and circle around the main areas a few times, calming down before I go to my mom's. Further description of this thing. It's weirdly flat, like someone trying to do a back bend but not bending. Its limbs were long and spindly, with pale skin stretched too tight across its bones. Has anyone else ever had an experience with a creature such as this? Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let's Read Official, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear it featured here on the channel. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.